This is episode number 250. Drum roll, please. And to celebrate this 250th episode, I thought I'd do something a little bit different today. What better than helping you make more money as an artist, helping you sell more, helping you market more. And so even though we typically do the art marketing podcast by itself, at the end of the Plein Air Podcast today, we're going to make it all art marketing podcast, and we're going to answer questions. And you're going to hear live questions from live people. We'll tell you more about that in a minute. Anyway, welcome back to the Plein Air Podcast.
This is the Plein Air Podcast with Rhoads, publisher and founder of Plein Air Magazine. In the Plein Air Podcast, we cover the world of outdoor painting. Called Plein Air, the French coined the term, which means open air or outdoors. The French pronounce it Plein Air. Others say Plein Air. No matter how you say it, there is a huge movement of artists around the world who are going outdoors to paint. And this show is about that movement. Now, here's your host, author, publisher, and painter, Rhoads.
Welcome to the Plein Air Podcast, everybody. I have not done the podcast for a little while. Normally I do it every single week. This is episode number 250. But let me tell you where I've been since we did it last. First off, I was at the Plein Air Convention. Plein Air Convention has been a wild ride. We had our 10-year birthday celebration. We had our guest, Jane Seymour. We did lots of prizes. I had my family there on stage with me. We gave away a $15,000 grand prize in the cover of Plein Air magazine for the Plein Air Salon Art Competition. Kimball Geyser was our winner. We painted outdoors every day. We had, of course, indoor sessions, but everybody painted throughout beautiful Colorado. It was spectacular. And it's really fun when you have a lot of people painting together. We happen to have several hundred, not exactly sure the number, but I want to say maybe 800-ish painting together at the Plein Air Convention. So it was really a lot of fun. And we painted all around Colorado in some incredibly beautiful spots. We had faculty members who wore the pink hats and would be there to help people so that they could get, you just flag down a faculty member and they give you help. And that's been a lot of fun. So we painted along rivers and mountains and a lot of different places. And then, of course, we had on-stage teaching every day, 80 instructors, and we had our big birthday bash celebration party at the end of it all. So it was a whole lot of fun. And then from there, I left, went back home, and then got a couple things together and waited for my son to leave for New Zealand, which he was doing an internship in New Zealand. So we spent a couple of days back in Austin, got him off to New Zealand, and then we drove to upstate New York to the Adirondacks, and I'm in my Adirondack studio right now. And then we had, as soon as I got here, we had my Adirondack event. We had 103 people. And it's a retreat. We painted together every day in the Adirondacks. So it was kind of like Colorado, similar scenery, absolutely stunningly beautiful, painting along rivers and so on. And we just had a really terrific time. We saw some old friends, and that was really fun too. So anyway, since then, quite frankly, I haven't done a whole lot of painting. I'd like to be doing more. I did go out. I wish I had some video to show you. I posted it on Instagram. I went out I have a little wooden electric painting boat, and I went out to paint the pagoda on our lake, which was built by Frederick Vanderbilt. And it's a true Japanese pagoda, and we call it the tea house. And unfortunately, there were a lot of ski boats going by. And so I was just rocking like this. And so my lines were all wonky and did not really have any opportunity to do a decent painting from all of that, but it kept me loose, that's for sure. Anyway, today is an interesting day because we're going to be doing art marketing questions. And the art marketing questions come from the Dreamliners group, which is kind of a group of people who were founded during COVID because they liked our daily streamline broadcast, which we're still doing on YouTube. Anyway, they're going to be answering questions in just a minute. I want to thank everyone for making us number one podcast 2 years in a row on FeedSpot. That's always kind of nice. It's a it's just nice to be recognized, right? What can I say? We have a couple of things coming up I want to tell you about real quickly before we get going. First off, Fall Color Week is my next artist retreat. It's September 29th for a week. And it's the last year we're doing it in the Adirondacks. We did it here once before. Last year we were in Maine. We've been in New Hampshire. We've been in Canada. We've been all over the place. Next year, we're going someplace completely different. But this is our last year. The color in the Adirondacks is spectacular. And we have, last I checked, exactly 22 seats left, which is a pretty low number for this time because usually people book a lot later. But anyway, things are happening faster. So you want to do that. The next thing I want to tell you about is I'm taking a group of people to Europe. So we're going to be going to Stockholm and then to Madrid. This is my fine art trip, and we do a lot of behind the scenes things. We go to museums, but oftentimes behind the scenes, we go to artist studios. And this is more of a collector trip. It's not a painting trip, but we have a lot of painters who go. And I always take my paints and I always squeeze some painting time in. And I'm not sure yet, but I'm thinking about doing an advanced trip a couple days before up to Mora, which is where Anders Zorn was born. And we're not sure about that yet. I've got to try to work that out. But if you have interest, go to finearttrip.com. And last but not least, the big enchilada coming up in August on the 17th. We have Essentials Day for Pastel Live on the 17th. And then the 18th, 19th, we have Pastel Live. Pastel Live has about 25 top tier instructors in pastel. You got to learn everything there is to learn about pastel, including, a lot of different styles, approaches, and so on. Some are loose, some are tight. Everybody's got a different thing. We cover a lot of different topics and portraiture and landscape and everything else. So that is coming up, Pastel Live, and you want to make sure that you check that out. And one of the things I'd like to say, I've been an oil painter most of my oil painting time, which is about 22 years. And not full-time, certainly. And I started painting in pastel because I thought I should, because we have Pastel Live. And I found a few things out about it that I never really understood. First off, pastel is really, really convenient. So sometimes when I don't want to put out my oils, if I don't have my paints out, I can just grab pastel sticks, whether it's pastel painting plein air painting or studio painting. The other thing I've learned is that I can get unbelievably brilliant color from pastel painting. But the thing that I think was the most amazing thing for me is when I started attending Pastel Live, Watercolor Live, some of the other events that we do, it started making my oil painting better. But first off, I got reinvigorated. I got excited again because I was learning new things. But also, I would take techniques that I learned on Pastel Live and think about, how could I apply that to oil and things that I'd never tried before, and it works pretty effectively. So anyway, our third annual Pastel Live is the largest pastel event in the world. It's huge. We have a worldwide audience. We have people from all over the world teaching and people from all over the world attending. We actually have people who attend live from places like Hong Kong and New Zealand and Australia. We always have a lot of people from Australia. And they're up in the middle of the night watching, which is pretty cool. But some of them watch only the replays. But when you're on live, you get the benefit, because on live you can win prizes. You have the interaction with other people, and so that's always pretty cool. So that is coming up. That's Pastel Live. You can learn more about that, of course, at pastellive.com. And most importantly, I want to talk to you about today. 250 episodes of the Plein Air Podcast. I started the podcast 250 episodes ago because my whole goal in life is to teach people painting and to teach people plein air painting. Plein air painting changed my life. I started doing it. I don't know what age I was, but the kids were just born or right about to be born. And my wife said, get the smell of the paint out of the house. I had to go outdoors, and I fell in love with painting outdoors. I didn't know there was much going on. There wasn't much going on. You really couldn't learn much about it. There weren't very many events, maybe 2 events, 3 events tops. Today, there are 300 events. We, of course, started Plein Air Magazine, started Plein Air Convention, started these retreats, and we have a whole bunch of training videos and other things that we do. And it's just been very satisfying to watch the explosion of plein air. And the Plein Air Podcast, I don't know the numbers, but I heard numbers like 1.5 million downloads. Um, that's a lot of people downloading. It doesn't mean that many people listening all the time. But we have, I looked one time at the stats probably 2 or 3 years ago, and we had 90 different countries that were listening. And so what seems to be happening, and I certainly don't want to take any credit for this, but what seems to be happening is the plein air movement is really spreading throughout the world, and that's a beautiful thing. There are events that started out in Europe that didn't exist 10 years ago. There are events starting out in a lot of different countries. People are picking up everywhere. And we're one big family. And it's really wonderful. People will show up at the plein air convention and they'll say, hey, I'm from Russia, or I'm from Ukraine, or I'm from England, or I'm from France, or, I mean, everywhere in the world. And then on the daily broadcasts, we're getting people from all over the world. It's just really satisfying to see this whole world of art come together. So I'd just like to personally say thank you. Thank you. If you're somebody who's been a regular listener, thank you for tuning in on a regular basis. It really means a lot to me. These things are a whole lot of work for a lot of people involved, and it's just really wonderful to be able to do something and see the stats and see that people are listening, and most important, see that people are beginning plein air painting and also learning a lot about plein air painting so they can take it to the next level. I started a few years ago, I started adding art marketing to the end of the podcast because I want to help people, because I always get questions about that. And so we always add it to the end. And today, as a special 250 anniversary, we are doing art marketing for the whole podcast. And what we did is we went to the Dreamliners group. Dreamliners group started when I started Art School Live, and they started talking every day and kind of became this club. And it was just a few members here and there. Now they're up to about 3,700 members. And you can join the Dreamliners group on Facebook at Dreamline Artists. I have nothing to do with it. I don't control it. They're their own thing. They have their own hierarchy. And, I couldn't control it if I wanted to. Not that I want to. And today, though, what I did is I contacted them and I said, hey, I'd like to get everybody on a broadcast and ask me art marketing questions, and I'll give you depth. In the art marketing minute, I kind of don't give as much depth as I'd like to because I want to keep it moving. But we went into depth with the Dreamline artists on Facebook for the art marketing segment for this thing. So let's get started. I hope you enjoy it.
This is the Marketing Minute with Eric Rhoads, author of the #1 Amazon bestseller, Make More Money Selling Your Art, Proven Techniques to Turn Your Passion into Profit.
I'm Pat Wadham from Louisiana, and I've been a professional realtor for 40 years and been painting for about 13 years. So I have a lot of experience in marketing. So as an artist, what % of our gross income should be spent on marketing for budgeting purposes?
Well, I think that's a loaded question. Everybody's going to be a little bit different. Everybody has to spend marketing money based on the timing of their marketing, right? So let me give you an example of that, Pat. If you're a brand new artist, you have no brand whatsoever. People don't know who you are. People need to discover you. You're going to spend a higher level of money on your marketing to build yourself up at that time. And that will probably last for potentially a few years, because it takes a few years to really properly brand yourself as an artist. Now, it depends on where you're branding yourself too. So branding yourself in where did you say you live?
Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Baton Rouge. Okay, so in Baton Rouge, the cost of marketing is going to be a lot different than the cost of marketing in, let's say, San Antonio or in New York City or something. So, and if you're focusing on local marketing versus national marketing, et cetera, then it changes. So I believe that every artist should have at least a dual strategy and probably a trio, and that would be a local marketing strategy, local meaning local and regional, and a national marketing strategy, meaning reaching the entire US if you're in the US or whatever your country is, and then potentially an international strategy if that makes sense for you. It does for some artists. I was talking to T. Allen Lawson yesterday or the day before, and he's doing a big show in London. And about the last time he did a show in London, about 50% of the audience bought from Europe, and the other 50% bought from the United States. And so that would be an example of someone who has an international strategy. He has a gallery in London. He probably has them in other places as well. But this gives you an opportunity then to grow in other markets if you feel that need. Most of us aren't going to need that because we're probably likely to sell all we need in either our local or our national strategy. So if you're brand new, then you've got a lot more marketing expense than you normally would. And there's the issue of time versus money. So in the case of time versus money, a lot of us don't have any money to market, but we have plenty of time. And so you can make up for a lot of the lack of money with time by, even if you're hand addressing envelopes by yourself and taking the time to do it versus paying somebody to do that or paying a service to do that. It's going to depend on you. When I started my business, I had no money and I had a lot of time. And so I did everything imaginable for a number of years, probably I went 7 years without a paycheck when I first started my business. And so I think the idea is, you're contributing what you can give of yourself towards that marketing effort. You might not be able to afford advertising in the beginning. You might have to do, list building or other things, which we'll probably talk about. Does that answer your question?
Yes, and I have tons more, so I'll wait for somebody else to answer. Now I'll get some more in.
Good to see you. I'm Linda Marie Crabb. I'm always here in Italy. And yes. And my question is, a lot of what's in the book, and I love the book, but it doesn't work over here overseas. For example, you just mentioned, I believe you said he's an American artist who shows in London. But in Italy, the market is totally different from what it is in the States. And so I was wondering if you make a new edition, will you include more for an international artist or perhaps like a small chapter where there are other things? Because here it's marketing is, if you go up to an Italian and you ask if you can have their email address, if they're watching over your shoulder while you're painting, they're going to be thinking that you have other motives. And so some of the things just don't work in Europe. And so that's my question.
Well, let me answer that in a couple of ways, Linda Marie. You want to be called Linda or Linda Marie?
Linda's fine.
Okay. So first off, Europe is different and different areas of Europe are different. I've been told that the way I do marketing would never fly in England, for instance, because it's just too abrupt, too direct, too in your face, so to speak. And yet, I remember a story about a friend of mine who's a world famous marketing guy, consultant, and he was told this. He said, he wanted to do a series of seminars in England, and his advisors said, no, you can't do that. You can't use the same kind of headlines, the same kind of copy, the same approaches. And he said, well, I don't believe that for a minute. He said, what works, works. And he says, I don't think I need to change my tone. I don't think I need to change anything. And well, they battled on that, but he decided that he was going to do it the way he wanted to do it anyway. And he had a partner in England, and that partner was the one saying, it won't work over here. Well, it not only did it work, is that he sold out everything, and he sold it out fast. And his partner living there realized that what he's being told about what you can and cannot do in England is only opinion. And so his partner now has built a thriving business using same type of marketing that this fellow Dan Kennedy used. And so I would caution, we hear a lot, Linda, not just in Europe, but throughout the United States as well. We hear people say, well, I could never do that, or I can't do that, or people don't want that. You've got to be thinking about really understanding your audience. And sometimes we think we understand our audience and we don't understand it. So let me give you an example. I work with a guy who is a world-class marketing consultant who built a company from 0 to $400 million in 2 years. And he did it using certain types of marketing. And he was told, this type of marketing, lots of frequent emails, that type of thing is just too much, never worked, and that he would completely lose his list. And so he went ahead with this anyway, and he would send emails daily, sometimes 2 or 3 emails daily. And he lost about 2% of his list. The rest never left him. And he gets massive amounts of response every day. So I think that there's a rule in marketing that applies really to everything, and that is to test everything. Maybe asking somebody for an email when you're out, painting, and somebody talks to you, maybe that is something you're not comfortable with. And if you're not comfortable with, don't do anything in marketing that you're not comfortable with. But there may be a way, and you want to test different ways. Maybe it's having a little card that you hand out that's got a QR code on it, or maybe there's a QR code on your easel, or maybe there is some kind of an explanation that makes it, in the eyes of the beholder, an acceptable thing. So those things might work, they might not work. We all have to adapt. And I've been doing marketing now in the United States and a little bit in some other countries from time to time. I did marketing for, I can't mention the name, but a world famous watch company out of a foreign country. And so what you have to do is you just have to kind of figure it out. You have to try things, you have to adapt, you have to, things that are hot 1 minute change. 2 years, 3 years ago, Facebook, you could do almost anything on Facebook. You could do retargeting on Facebook that would get to all the Apple phones, and then Apple changed it. And so now you can't do retargeting on those phones unless those people have given you permission. So that killed a lot of businesses overnight. I hurt my own business. Thankfully, we knew it was coming. We had planned for it. We had some other things ready. So you're going to be experimental and just try things, but be careful about what you tell yourself. We give ourselves messages, and those messages might be true. They might be, if I were to ask my friends, I have an employee, a guy who works for me, and he's always saying, this won't work. We shouldn't do this. We do too much of that, on and on and on and on. And for him, he's right. I would never respond to that. I would never do this. But the reality is what we're doing is working. It's working well. And we have tested the ways that he suggested, because we always, somebody says, hey, try this, we're going to try it. And, there are people who believe that long emails are necessary. There are other people who believe that short emails are necessary. There are other people who believe no emails are necessary. So we test it, and we test it all the time. So if we're sending out an email, we have taken a certain number of people, and maybe a small group of people, maybe it's 1,000 people, and we've sent half of that group one way and half of that group another way, and then we track the response. And so, and whatever wins, that's what we end up doing. Sometimes it's a short email, sometimes it's a long one, sometimes it's no email, sometimes it's an image. So you just got to try everything. Related to the book, I'm working on another book. I don't have any plans to update the current book, although I might at some point. I've updated it one time. And the next book, I'm not going to get too much detail about it yet. I would say it's about a quarter of the way done. And it's just kind of trying to reflect some new things that I've learned and some new things that I've discovered. So we'll talk about that when the time comes.
Okay, thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you.
It's great to be here, Eric. I can't thank you enough for all that you've done. And if not for COVID, I never would have found this wonderful book. I love this book. It is filled with so much good information that I always keep it nearby. And if I could show you the highlights, it's practically all highlighted for important information.
Okay, I'm going to put you on the spot. Show me the highlights.
Show you some of them. Okay, so
No,
I
I'm just
got
kidding.
tired of highlighting every line, so I just put a yellow line down the entire page because just putting a few here and there wasn't cutting it. It was all important. So I'm Elaine Miller, and I'm an artist. I've been painting for about 8 years, and I've owned Series Art Gallery that I created 7 years ago. And I am just so thrilled to have your guidance in all that we're doing here. My question is, with all the news about the economy coming up, and I'm trying not to listen to news, but the economy goes in a roller coaster and we might be coming into a recession. What is your advice for artists and galleries to protect themselves during a recession? What's the best advice to give?
Well, first off, I think we've been in a recession for several months. And I think that, the news media tries to control the narrative, or somebody tries to control a narrative. We've been in a recession for a long time. We've seen indicators of business changing substantially for at least 6 months, maybe 8 months. And so I think that, we're in it, and I talk to a lot of artists every day, and many of the artists that I talk to are feeling it. They're not seeing the level of sales. They're worried, they're concerned. And I'll just tell you a couple of stories. In the Great Depression, now the Great Depression was worse than any recession that we've seen in the United States since, although there's been some that have been close. The Great Depression, I'm hearing feedback. Did somebody unmute? Okay. So in the Great Depression, there was a dominant cereal company. It was called Post. They did Post Toasties. They did Postum. They did, all kinds of things. You've heard of Marjorie Merriweather Post. It was her father that created that company. It became General Foods. And during the Great Depression, there was a startup company called Kellogg's, Kello good, right? And Kellogg's started advertising when the Depression started. And the board of directors at Post, one of the people at Post Cereals went to the board of directors and said, hey, there's this young startup company and they're advertising a lot. And we've cut all of our advertising because of the Depression, because we've believed that, we're number one and we're going to always remain number one. And the board met and they said, yeah, we're going to keep that philosophy. Nobody's going to beat us. They're a gnat. They're a little company. Just ignore them. Well, by the end of the Great Depression, and now Post Cereals at the beginning of the Depression had a 90% market share. At the end of the Depression, Kellogg had a 75% market share. They beat Post, and to this day, Post has never recovered, to this day. And the reason this is an important story is because a recession or a depression is the biggest opportunity to grow, because you can grow with almost no noise. So what happened to Kellogg? They dominated at the time newspapers and radio. They were advertising heavily. I'm sure it was really hard for them to put that money out there, but it was working. They were winning, and nobody else was advertising, or very few others were advertising. So not only were they advertising, they were getting great rates because the media was desperate. And so this is the message, and that is to always remember that if you're going to go down, you go down in flames. And what that basically means is you've got to try everything. You never give up. 50%, at least 50% of your success or failure during any time is about your attitude, your mindset. And it's also about your mindset in a tough economy. So here's what happens. I was in the radio broadcasting business for a number of years, and I was always able to say, uh-oh, the recession is right around the corner, because we saw trends when everybody started canceling their radio advertising and the TV stations, but it had not been publicly announced yet that it was a recession. When we see people cutting expenses, you know there's a problem. And so what's the first thing everybody cuts? They cut advertising, because they look at advertising as an unnecessary expense, when in reality, advertising is the opposite of that. It's a total important expense, and something that they do all the other times. Why wouldn't they do it here? So there's a gallery. I think it's okay to mention a name, but I better not. There's a gallery that started up in 2008, and all of a sudden they just appeared on the scene, and they had all these major artists. They appeared on the scene in 2008. And I was in the advertising business at the time. I have Fine Art Connoisseur and Plein Air magazine, and I noticed that we were losing a lot of advertisers. But this advertiser was, instead of buying one page, they're buying 5, 6, 7, 8 pages of advertising, and they were just blowing everybody out of the water. And so a few years later, I had dinner with this advertiser, and I said, okay, what's the deal here? I think I know what was going on, but you tell me, because he had since sold the gallery. He said, well, I used to be a consultant for one of the major consulting firms. And he said, I know that the best possible time to make a business is during a recession, because everybody's going to stop advertising. He said, all of my competitors, all the ones that I had targeted and cared about, all of them had either reduced their advertising or stopped altogether. He said, I got 10% of the customers from each of my top 10 competitors. He said, several of those galleries don't exist today because they stopped advertising. He said the 10%, there's always money that will buy. Those 10% will always buy. He said, my goal was to get all those 10%ers that are going to keep buying. And so a lot of galleries went away during that period of time. In Santa Fe, I think I remember there were 210 galleries, something to that effect, that went away. I may be wrong about that. And yet the ones who survived are the ones who kept their face far forward. They were out there. They were doing the same disciplines that they were doing before. And in some cases, like this guy, they were doing more. So, what happens when you're trying to cut expenses, you start looking at the things and saying, oh, these are unnecessary. Well, I won't do any shows for a while. I won't do any gallery shows because that wine and crackers and cheese are too expensive. Or I'm not going to do any advertising, or whatever the promotional, I'm not going to do any direct mail or any postcards or any books or, whatever they normally do. And so what happens is that you're out of sight, you're out of mind, people forget about you. There's a concept in advertising called momentum. And it's true with all things, is once you build momentum, you're really crushing it. You're just driving through. But the minute you stop putting fuel in the airplane starts to glide down, and then that airplane eventually crashes if it can't land. And so the same is true for momentum. When you're building up your brand as an artist, or you're building up your brand as a gallery, there's this, this theory, that post serials took on, which is, well, we're so big, if we stop for a couple of years, it's not going to matter. I had an advertiser, again, no names. I had an advertiser who called me up and said, I've been advertising consistently for 5 or 6 years. I'm going to stop and move my money somewhere else for a while. And I said, well, I think that's a mistake. And I know you're going to believe I'm just saying that because I don't want to lose your business, which is also true. I said, but the problem is that you have built up momentum with my audience, and you're deciding you're going to go to a completely new audience that doesn't know you. They don't know you exist. There's going to be some overlap, 2 or 3% probably, but they don't know you. So you're starting from scratch. So you're going to get out there and you're going to spend your money, and you're going to have to spend more money than normal because you are trying to get known. Oh, no, that's not true. Everybody knows me now. Everything's going to be fine. So person left. About 3, 4 months, 6 months tops later, person calls and says, my phone stopped ringing. I stopped hearing from people. I'm not top of mind anymore. I'm coming back. So what ended up happening is the ads in the beginning of this other publication weren't working yet. It takes time. You got to build up momentum. And not only that, but this person was out of sight, out of mind with the audience that had been built up. As a result, things go down pretty fast. So you always want to maintain a presence. I've always believed that to some extent, any presence is better than no presence. I do have a caveat to that, and that is, if you're a full page advertiser, or you're a double page advertiser, what we call a double truck, and all of a sudden you become a quarter page advertiser, you're sending a signal to your market that something's wrong. And so if you're a quarter page advertiser and you maintain a little smaller ad, that we don't sell them, but if you had a smaller ad, that is probably not as dramatic as moving from 3 times the size, 4 times the size. So, there are a lot of things like that you have to keep in mind. I'm not sure I answered your question.
Oh, you did. You did. Marketing. Maintain the marketing and don't disappear. I mean, the serial story is proof that it works. It worked in the Depression. And so if we can all hold on to that idea, if we're in a dip, then we put all of our money that we can into staying visible and not drop out with the rest of them, because the people who are the survivors are the ones who are going to be successful. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. I had a fly-in a few weeks ago. I had all my top executives fly in, and I made a speech. Now, we had lots of agenda items for 2 days, but I made a speech and I said, if anybody here is thinking about cutting expenses, just know I'm totally for cutting expenses if we need to. And it's always better to get out ahead of it. But I am not cutting any advertising expenses. As a matter of fact, I intend to increase advertising. And, a lot of deer in the headlights looks, and then I tell these stories. So this is a really great time. It's really a good time for an artist to launch. Now you have to have the money to launch. Now you don't have to do advertising, but if you're going to do things that cost you money, you're going to have some of that. And anybody who's starting a business, and you as artists are business, and so, or if you're gallery, I mean, when you're launching a business, you have to put money aside for marketing. Now, I didn't answer the question about the percentage, and I will answer that. Because that was an early question. like I said, standard is, I didn't say a standard, but I said there is a higher than normal level in the beginning. And then once you get to a point of maintenance, you probably don't have to work as hard. I think it depends on the type of business too. Like if you're in the cosmetics business has a 90% margin. Glop is basically just mud with dye in it. Lipstick is just goop, right? It costs nothing to make. The most expensive part about it is the packaging. And they will spend loads of money on advertising because they got 90% profit. They spend a lot of their money on advertising. They grow their business. They've still got 50% profit. If you're in a business where you have no profit, then you can't spend a lot of money. So in your business, I don't want to diminish this, but the reality is, at least as an artist, it's your time and some materials. And so you have a little bit of flexibility there. You have what I would consider to be a high margin business. Now, if you have a gallery, you're giving away half of that to the gallery. So now you're in a much lower margin business. So you have to decide. The other thing you can do is you can partner, collaborate with others, whether it's your gallery. There's a thing called co-op advertising where a lot of people will go to their gallery and they'll say, listen, I want you to advertise me and I'll pay 50% of the ads when you feature me as the primary artist. Because now you're buying an ad for half off. They're buying an ad for half off. You both get benefit. You're getting benefit of them promoting you. Next question. Katie, what's your question? Oh, tell us who you are.
I'm Katie Smith, and I'm from Santa Maria, California. And my question is about mastermind groups. I'm wanting to start a mastermind group with some like-minded people. And I'm wondering how you go about choosing who to be in a group with. And then also, as we get started, should we place a time frame on our group from the get-go and say we're going to be together for 1 year or 2 years or 5 years? Is there some kind of a time frame that should be established, or do people come and go from mastermind groups and it stays as a body that changes its members over time?
All right, I'm gonna answer that first, and then I'm going to answer the other piece of it later. You want to try it out before you commit to anything. The key to a good mastermind group is who's in the group and how participative they are. And if you find somebody's a dud, you got to move them out. So you've got to have somebody who's the head of that mastermind group who is going to be willing to make the tough decisions and call people out if they're not participating. Now, let me just back up and say that if you don't know what a mastermind group is, it's a group of people who get together to share information so that you can grow. The idea is you have one mind, but if there are 6 of you together, you have a mastermind. Everybody's working on your problem and you're working on their problem. I have been in and paid for to attend multiple masterminds in my life. And I wish I'd have learned about them when I was 30, because I would have done it then. I'm in one mastermind now. I spend a substantially high amount of money, the equivalent of a full-time salary for one person to be in a mastermind, and not just an average person, but a pretty high level person. And the reason I do it is because I have 15 other people working on my business and they can see things I can't see. And they tell me the truth, even when my baby is ugly. So tell me your first part of your question again.
The first one was just how to choose who to be in a group with.
Yeah.
How
Okay.
to filter.
Well, I think the first thing is to set a goal, and the goal is to understand what it is you want. What's my mastermind about? Is it to sit around and chat and have friends? Or is it to become a better painter? Or is it to become a better marketer or a better business person? You need to articulate that. And then you need to handpick the people that you think are the smartest people that you can get your hands on, because the reality, you're starting a mastermind so that you can learn from the best. And you're going to have people who want to participate, and you're going to have to be willing to, in the nicest possible way, say, sorry, Charlie. And that you don't have to be rude to anybody, and maybe they don't even know about it. But I think the idea is, you try to articulate. So you pick up the phone and you call one person, and you call your, one of your top targets, and you say, hey, it's Katie. Remember me? Hey, I've been observing that you're doing this really, really well. That's your superpower from what I can tell. Would you agree? Yes or no? Yes. I do this really well. This is my superpower. Would you say that I do that better or worse than you? And if they say, well, you're probably doing better than I am in that, you say, well, why don't we put our heads together? Let's meet, once a quarter, once a month, and let's just compare notes, and I'll help you and you help me. And why don't we see if we can get you, would you agree to that? Sure. No charge, right? And then what areas of your life are missing that you need help with? Let's say it's about marketing. I need somebody who really understands advertising. Oh, I do too. Why don't we I understand that, this person is really good at advertising. And so, and I would start it out small. I'd keep it to 2 or 3 people in the beginning, see how it goes. You have to have a format. You have to follow a discipline. You've got to have a leader who's going to be like, we're not going there. This is off topic. And I have a mastermind actually this week for 2 full days in Austin, Texas. And the guy who runs my mastermind that I pay a lot of money to, he keeps us on task. We're not talking about that. That's not relevant. And he just kind of reins us in all the time, because it's real easy to get off on stories and things that are not focused. And so you want to keep it focused. And if you really want to do it, you can also find a professional who can kind of guide your group, but that's going to cost you money. Did that answer your question?
That did. Yeah. What about the time frame though? Is it something that there should be a time frame on? Like when you're in these mastermind groups, are they open-ended, or is there?
Yeah, I would say let's try it for a year and see how it goes. And if everybody participates and everybody wants to keep going, and if somebody drops out, then you get to invite somebody else in. I wouldn't necessarily make it a group thing, but you can. But the thing you got to be careful of is you're going to have friends who want to get into the group that are not necessarily people who are going to put in the work. Everybody's got to put in the work.
And in your book, great book again, you talk a lot about social media, and this book was written a few years ago, so things have changed, but it seems like what you covered in the book is still relevant. But you just talk about that you use LinkedIn a lot, which I've never spent a lot of time on. I know things have changed with Instagram and Facebook to more reels. Can you talk a little bit about social media and how we can use it to our advantage?
Well, yes, I can. Thank you, Pat. The first thing to understand about social media is that it's ever changing. Instagram and Facebook, and they're hot. But does anybody remember MySpace? They were hot and then they were not. Things don't seem to go in and out quite as quickly, but TikTok came on fast. And there's some talk about TikTok being restricted in the future, et cetera. So things are always going to be changing. The other thing is there's change constantly within those organizations. 1 minute they're focusing on Reels, the next minute they're focusing on something else. The reason they're all focusing on Reels right now is because TikTok is eating their lunch in terms of time spent online. And so they want Reels, they want things that are quick, that people can flip through. And so they will reward you. And typically these organizations will tell you what they're thinking, or you can see clues, like they say, hey, we're opening up a new thing called this or that. Whenever they have a new thing, be the first to jump on it, because they will reward you. If you're putting content on their new thing, then they are going to make sure you're getting pushed out there, and you want them pushing you out there. The average, if you're on Facebook, the average number has gone down from 7% to 3%. And what that means is that, let's say you you think you're a big deal. Let's say you have 5,000 followers. And you think every time I put something out on Facebook, all 5,000 of my followers see what I'm writing or posting. Not true. A year ago, 2 years ago, 7%, only 7% see what you're using or what you're posting. Today, only 3% see it. So you're talking to no one. And the only way that you're going to get to more people is if you do boost post advertising, which I don't recommend because I don't think it works. Secondly, is you have to figure out how to get Facebook to push you to other people. So if Facebook sees high engagement, or Instagram too, or LinkedIn really, if they see high engagement on your page, then they will reward you with more views because they want people engaging. So things like asking a question, you see somebody ask a question about something and everybody chimes in with an answer. Facebook sees that, Instagram sees that, and they're like, oh, this person's got a lot of people interacting. That means more people will interact if we push it out there. So now they're going to show it to 7% instead. And it gets more action. Maybe they'll show it to another 5% and so on. Even the people who have 10 million followers aren't getting out to more than a small percentage of their people. But if they get good interaction, so that's why engaging content, things that are relevant to the audience, that's why those things matter. Did that answer your question?
It did. I guess the second part of that, again, with the social media, you said you don't believe in boosting our ads, but if you run an ad, you can target your friends and friends of your friends, right? And that would force everybody to see your painting or whatever you're putting out. Is that true?
No, I didn't say I didn't believe in ads. I said I don't believe in boosting. There's a difference. There are boosting ads. You get these little things that say, do you want to boost this post? That doesn't even necessarily mean it's going to be boosted to your friend list. It might be boosted to some group in Afghanistan or something. It doesn't necessarily mean they're going to see it. It's just that more people will see it and not a lot of more people. And you got to ask yourself, okay, if I spend an extra $20, what is that worth to me? Why am I doing it? If you cannot see a specific return on your Instagram or your Facebook, this is a giant trap. You have all these people who believe, they beat their chest because they have 100,000 followers. Having 100,000 followers on Instagram is the equivalent of having 5,000 followers on Facebook. It's been proven time and time again. Instagram, it depends on what kind of following you have and where you're being followed, but it's what we call vanity metric. And so if you're focusing on vanity metric, I hired an agency to help me with social media posting, and they helped me a lot. They got a lot of stuff out there. And I was spending, I don't know, some large amount of money every month. And I looked at it and I said, why am I doing this? Because I'm not making any money from it. And I'm not trying to make money for it. I don't monetize my YouTube show. I don't monetize any of my stuff like some people do. I don't really want people driving ads in my stuff. And it's not worth the money to me. I'm doing it for completely different reasons. I'm doing it about my community, what I'm involved in, plein air painting or realistic painting or otherwise. And so that's what that's more about for me. But I still to this day have not figured out how to make money with it. Now, I do know people who do, but those are not necessarily things that are a right fit for me. So I'm not necessarily going down that road.
Hi, my name's Gabriel Stockton. I live in sunny San Diego. And my question for you, Eric, is from a video publisher's point of view, what are the points that you're looking for in artists for consideration of making videos?
Well, everything in marketing boils down to one thing, Gabriel. What does the audience want? The hardest question to answer in any marketing is, how do I find out what my audience really wants? Because you can ask them and sometimes they don't know what they want. And I don't mean that to sound rude, but let me give you an example. I had a product that I developed back in 1902 or something. It was a product that had never been created before. It was a broadcast studio on wheels that looked like a giant radio. It was called a giant boombox. And I had a manufacturer lined up and I had this great idea. And I did a survey of radio stations that I wanted to sell it to. And the survey came back that they didn't want it. I even put a picture of it. Would you buy this if it was available for your radio station with your call letters on it? And they said they didn't want it. And I was pretty discouraged for a minute. And I thought, well, I'm going to do it anyway, because I think once I show them, they will want it. And I built a $6 million business on that overnight because of my gut instinct. Because I came out of that industry, my gut told me that I believed it to be the right time. Now I can tell you 30 other failure stories where my gut was wrong. So to answer your question, when we do art instruction courses, videos, master classes, whatever you want to call it, we're investing heavily in the artist. It's not unusual for us to invest $20, $30, $40, $50,000 in a single production. You know, we have Hollywood level video team, we have a sound stage, we have cameras that just the lenses alone are $7,000. The cameras are 20, 30, 40 grand. You know, this is really high quality stuff. You know, we spend a lot of days with them. There's travel involved and there's a lot of other things. And, you know, what I say to my team who helps me put this together, I say, okay, would you be willing to take $30,000, $40,000 out of your pocket and roll the dice on this artist that you're recommending to me? And there's usually a long pause. And oftentimes the answer is no. And, you know, and I want to be able to do anybody and everybody. I love artists. They're my friends. I want to be able to help them out whenever I possibly can. But at the end of the day, if I do too many failures, I'm not helping anybody. I may be helping the artist. They'll get a lot of publicity. But at the end of the day, if they're not making money, they're not going to come back to me. And if I'm not making money, I'm not going to want to do anything else with them. I may, maybe other things, but not that. So that's the problem is, you know, you have a big investment. So we ask a lot of questions when we're developing who we're going to approach. We ask questions like, what are their followings like? What is the interaction on their following? How, you know, how many people do they have on certain social media? How active are they at promoting themselves? Are they good? You know, we have some artists who work with us and promote themselves. We have other artists who they never want to help. They don't even want to tell anybody a website because they consider it to be evil to promote themselves. So you know, there's a lot of different things. At the end of the day, if we can't make it successful for us in some way and successful for our artist partners, it doesn't make sense to do it. And we get surprises all the time. We have artists that we've done on a whim, that we've invested in, that we have done massive sales with. We have artists that we have that are massive, big names that we've done things with that, you know, didn't do as well as we hoped they would. And, you know, so it's still very hard to understand what to do with it. But, you know, at the end of the day, we shoot 20, 25, 30 of these a year. So do the math. I mean, you're talking about a very big investment. And though we kind of look at it like a venture capital firm would look at companies, you know, they say, well, you know, we're going to invest in 10 companies. We hope that 7 of them make some money and 5 of them make a lot of money and 2 of them are really, really big hits. But that's not always true. I mean, sometimes we have several that don't do well, and sometimes we have some that do well. The artists always win. We don't always win. The artists always win. Max Ginsberg called me one day and he said, Eric, you made me famous. And I said, what's that all about? He says, well, you just talked about me so much that I'm getting invited all over the world, and I'm getting articles about me in other publications. And, so when we get behind an artist, if it makes sense, I mean, we're not going to put something inappropriate in, but if we have a watercolor artist, they're going to go into our watercolor newsletter, or if a pastel artist, our newsletter, or our general interest newsletter, or our magazines, and on our stages at the conventions, those kinds of things. We try to be as proactive as possible to push these. Answer your question?
That does. Thank you so much.
This has been the Marketing Minute with Eric Rhoads. You can learn more at artmarketing.com.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. If you have questions, email me, eric@artmarketing.com. We'll get them on the Art Marketing Podcast and also on the Plein Air Podcast. I have an art marketing blog. It's artmarketing.com. It's real easy. And you can go there and learn a lot about it. I have videos and things like that at painttube.tv. But if you're really interested in a career in selling your work, marketing your work is obviously an important part of it. And I studied marketing long before I ever got into art. I did marketing. I wasted a lot of years and a lot of dollars making a lot of stupid mistakes and learning things. And I'm still up on it. I still stay very, very current. I'm in marketing groups and a lot of other things. And so anyway, I hope you enjoyed it today. I want to remind you guys, Pastel Live is coming up in August. Make sure to sign up for that at pastellive.com. The next artist retreat I've got coming up is Fall Color Week, which is a week of painting in September into the early October. And last but not least, we still have some seats left on our fine art trip to Stockholm and Madrid. We go deep and we get contacts that you'll never meet on your own. We do experiences that you'll never be able to do on your own because we use our Rolodex. Anybody remember what a Rolodex is? And so that's something that we try to do. Want to remind you guys that we do have a regular podcast called the Art Marketing Minute, and look for that. It's on its own, but you can also get that at the end of these broadcasts. I'd like to encourage you guys to subscribe to Plein Air Magazine. That's kind of the root of it all. And some of you are not yet subscribers. Tens of thousands of you are. Thank you for that. If you're out of the country, a lot of people just pick the digital edition. But most people pick the subscription to digital and print because the digital comes out sooner, right? You don't have to wait for the mail. And it has 30% more content, more images, things that we just don't have enough paper to do because paper is expensive. Last but not least, I want to tell you about my blog called Sunday Coffee. I come out with it every Sunday, and you can find it for free. It's at coffeewitheric.com. So anyway, I want to thank you guys for watching today, for being here for the 250th episode, for listening. And remember, it's a big world out there. Go paint it. We'll see you. Bye-bye.
This has been the Plein Air Podcast with Plein Air Magazine's Eric Rhoads. You can help spread the word about plein air painting by sharing this podcast with your friends. And you can leave a review or subscribe on iTunes so it comes to you every week. And you can even reach Eric by email, eric@pleinairmagazine.com. Be sure to pick up our free ebook, 240 plein air painting tips by some of America's top painters. It's free at pleinairtips.com. Tune in next week for more great interviews. Thanks for listening.